What is that smell? Dean Victor Haldon wrinkled his nose and slowly looked across the great hall. Hundreds of freshmen went quiet. Then he pointed toward the black student sitting in the front row. "You, stand up." Marcus Reed rose from his seat. He wore a clean flannel shirt, faded jeans, and work boots with traces of dried Virginia clay still caught around the soles. His back stayed straight. Haldon fanned the air in front of his face. "You smell like cattle. What does your father do?" Marcus looked directly at him. "He's a farmer, sir." Haldon turned towards the audience and opened his arms as if he had just been handed the perfect joke. A farmer's son, a young man who probably spends his life cleaning barns and shoveling manure. A few students laughed. Marcus did not. "There's nothing shameful about where someone comes from, sir." Haldon leaned closer. His voice dropped until only Marcus and the people nearest the front could hear. "Then your father should have taught you to clean yourself before entering my school." A gasp moved through the first rows. Marcus clenched his jaw. Then he sat down without another word. Haldon had no idea that the quiet student he had just humiliated was not only one of the most accomplished freshmen in the entire class. He was also the son of the man whose anonymous gift had built one of Hargrove University's most celebrated research centers. And not long after Marcus called home, a convoy of black sport utility vehicles would roll through the iron gates. Men in dark suits would walk directly toward Dean Haldon's office. By the time they left, the dean would understand something he should have understood before he ever picked up that microphone. A person's worth is not written on their boots. But before any of that happened, Marcus Reed was just a young man standing in a chicken coop on a working farm in rural Virginia. Mist moved low across 200 acres of open pasture. A rooster called from behind the barn. Marcus scattered feed with one hand while holding a worn leather notebook in the other. Every few moments he stopped and sketched. Not cartoons, not random notes, engineering diagrams. He had been working on a solar-powered drip irrigation system designed to help small farms reduce water waste. He drew valves, pressure lines, solar cells, moisture sensors. He made small corrections while hens pecked around his boots. Marcus was not simply a farmer's son. He was a builder, a problem solver, a young man who looked at a dry field and immediately began thinking about how to make water reach it more efficiently. The barn door creaked behind him. A tall man stepped through the mist. Broad shoulders, faded army cap, work shirt, boots covered with mud from the previous day's chores. His name was Warren Reed. From a distance, he looked like almost any farmer you might pass on a country road without giving a second thought. But Warren Reed was also the founder and chief executive officer of Canopy Global Industries. The company had grown into a $4.2 billion agricultural technology and green energy business. It held patents in 31 countries. Business magazines had profiled Warren more than once. Investors knew his name. Government officials returned his calls. Universities invited him to speak. Yet the place Warren felt most comfortable was still the farm. He had also quietly given Hargrove University $85 million to build its Sustainable Agriculture Research Center. The donation was anonymous. No building carried his name. No bronze plaque thanked him. No press conference had been held. Warren had insisted on that. He had not raised Marcus inside a mansion. He raised him on a working farm. Get up early. Feed the animals. Fix what breaks. Finish what you start. Earn what you receive. Those were the rules. Inside the farmhouse, father and son sat across from each other at a worn oak table. Black coffee steamed between them. Buttered toast rested on two chipped plates. Behind Warren's chair, partly hidden by a coat rack, was a framed magazine cover featuring him in a dark business suit. Dust had collected on the glass. Warren looked at his son. "You sure you don't want me to drive you?" Marcus shook his head. "I want to do this on my own, Dad. Start on my own 2 feet." Warren studied him. There was pride in his face. There was also a small amount of worry. Then he nodded. "That's my boy." Marcus lifted his old backpack. Warren held out the car keys. Marcus smiled and refused them. "A bus is fine." I walked down the gravel driveway toward the road. Warren stayed on the porch with coffee in his hand and watched until his son disappeared beyond the trees. When Marcus eventually stepped off the bus in front of Hargrove University, the campus looked like it had been designed to make ordinary people question whether they belonged there. Gothic stone towers rose above the trees. Ivy covered the walls. An enormous donor display in the main lobby carried names associated with judges, senators, financiers, surgeons, and old family fortune. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and polished stone. Marcus walked through the gates carrying one backpack and one duffel bag. Around him, other freshmen arrived in luxury vehicles. Black Mercedes, white electric cars, a bright red sports car. Parents wearing expensive linen carried designer luggage toward the dormitories. Marcus carried his own bags. His boots still had dried clay in the seams. He found his assigned room. His roommate was a blonde student in an expensive polo shirt. The roommate looked at Marcus, then at the boots, then at the small streak of dried mud that had fallen onto the floor. He said nothing. I left. Soon afterward, a resident advisor appeared and told Marcus that his roommate had requested a transfer. Marcus unpacked alone. He placed the leather engineering notebook on the desk. He hung a photograph of the farm above the bed. Then he folded his clothes, arranged his books, and made the room his own. It did not take long to understand how status worked at Hargrove. Blake Harrington arrived in a luxury sport utility vehicle. White polo shirt, sunglasses resting on top of his head. The vehicle had been a graduation gift from his father, Richard Harrington, a wealthy donor whose family name appeared on one of the university buildings. Everyone knew Blake's academic record was not what had opened the door. Nobody said it. Dean Halden greeted him personally on the front steps. Firm handshake, warm smile, a hand on the shoulder. Your father's legacy continues, Blake. We're proud to have you here. The difference was obvious. Professor Celeste Warren noticed it. Celeste had been assigned to advise Marcus because he was one of the chancellor's scholars, a small group of freshmen receiving the university's most prestigious full scholarship. When she asked Dean Halden about him, Halden barely looked up from his desk. The farm boy, he waved a hand. Let's hope he can keep up. Celeste did not like the tone. She pulled Marcus's admissions file. Then she sat quietly and read. His college entrance examination score was 1,580. He had earned a national gold medal in agricultural science. The admissions committee had described his personal essay as the strongest they had received in years. His science teachers called him unusually disciplined. His recommendations described a student who solved problems instead of waiting for someone else to solve them. Celeste closed the folder. Marcus Reed did not merely belong at Hargrove. By every academic measure that mattered, he had earned his place more clearly than many students who walked through those gates wearing expensive clothes and famous last names. Yet almost no one on campus knew. The freshman orientation ceremony took place inside Hargrove's Great Hall. The room was built to impress. Vaulted ceilings swallowed sound. Dark oak panels covered the walls. Portraits of former university leaders looked down from heavy frames. The faces were almost entirely white. The expressions seemed to carry the same message. Prove that you deserve to be here. 300 freshmen filled the seats. Parents watched from the balcony. Faculty members stood along the walls. Marcus sat in the front row because he had arrived early. Farm habit. Show up before you are expected. Be ready before anyone asks. Dean Victor Halden approached the podium wearing a tailored navy suit. Silver cufflinks caught the light. His smile looked polished. It did not look warm. Welcome to Hargrove, he began. Applause rolled through the hall. Halden began introducing the chancellor's scholars. There were 5. The first student came from a family of respected physicians. Halden spoke at length about the family's achievements. The audience applauded. The next came from a political family with generations of Hargrove graduates. Halden praised the tradition. More applause. Another scholar was the daughter of a well-known philanthropist. Halden described service as something that ran in the family. Each introduction came wrapped in prestige. Parents, grandparents, connections, family histories. It sounded less like a celebration of student achievement and more like a ceremony honoring bloodlines. Then Halden reached the final name. His smile faded. His eyes moved from the page to the front row. And finally, Marcus Reed. No mention of the National Science Medal. No mention of the exceptional entrance examination score. No mention of the admissions essay. No mention of the engineering work already filling his leather notebook. Just the name. Marcus stood. His flannel shirt was clean. His jeans were neat. His boots carried a faint trace of farm soil. Halden looked him up and down slowly. Mr. Reed comes to us from a rural background. He paused. His father is a farmer. Another pause. A farmer. The word echoed through the hall. Then came the question. What is that smell? Halden wrinkled his nose dramatically. He fanned the air. He stepped away from Marcus, as though standing close to him was uncomfortable. You smell like cattle, son. What does your father do all day besides work around manure? Laughter broke out. Not from everyone, but from enough people. Blake Harrington laughed louder than most. He leaned toward another student and whispered something. More laughter followed. Marcus did not move. His hands stayed at his sides. His face remained controlled. Halden looked toward the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, one of your chancellor's scholars. Then he clapped slowly. 3 mocking claps. This university prepares future senators, surgeons, scientists, and national leaders. His eyes dropped toward Marcus's boots. Not scarecrows. The laughter spread. Students turned to stare. A parent in the balcony shook her head but remained seated. One professor stared down at the floor. No adult stood. No faculty member interrupted. No administrator told Halden to stop. And in that moment, the silence of the people who knew better carried almost as much weight as the laughter of the people who did not. Marcus finally spoke. There's nothing to be ashamed of about someone's background, sir. His voice was quiet, steady, far calmer than anyone would expect from a young man being humiliated in front of hundreds of strangers. Halden tilted his head. Then he leaned close. Too close. Then your father should have taught you to wash before entering my school. Several people near the front gasped. Marcus's jaw tightened. The muscles along his neck became rigid. His eyes burned. But he did not give Halden the reaction he seemed to want. Marcus sat down. He said nothing more. Halden straightened his suit jacket and returned to the podium. The ceremony continued, as though nothing important had happened. But something had happened. A black mother sitting with her daughter in the audience had taken out her phone when Halden first began mocking Marcus. Her name was Renee Palmer. She recorded the entire exchange. The fanning gesture, the insult, the slow clap, the remarks about farming, the comment about washing, and the long stretch of silence when adults could have intervened and chose not to. That recording would later matter enormously. Marcus left the great hall and walked across campus toward his dormitory. The air was cool. Leaves scraped across the stone paths beneath his boots. He kept his head up, eyes forward, breathing measured. Warren had taught him that years ago. Do not let another person's cruelty choose your next move. Marcus almost reached the dorm. Then Blake Harrington stepped out from beside a stone column. 2 friends stood with him. Blake folded his arms. Hey, farm boy. Marcus stopped. Blake smiled. Halden was right. You don't belong here. He stepped closer. His cologne was sharp and expensive. This university is for people like us, not people like you. Marcus said nothing. Blake leaned closer. Nothing to say? Or do you only know how to talk to cows? Then he shoved Marcus's shoulder. Not hard enough to knock him down. Hard enough to send a message. Blake smiled, as though he believed his father's name made him untouchable. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then he walked around him. No threat. No argument. No performance. When Marcus reached his room, he found dried straw pushed beneath the door. There was also a folded piece of paper. He opened it. The message called his scholarship charity and told him to go back to the barn. Marcus read it once, then again. He folded the note neatly. He placed it in his desk drawer. Evidence, not trash. A soft knock came at the door later. Professor Celeste Warren stood in the hallway. Her eyes were red. Her voice was unsteady. Marcus, what happened in that hall was wrong. He looked at her. Celeste continued. I should have spoken up. I was standing there. I knew it was wrong, and I stayed quiet. I'm sorry. Marcus's expression remained calm. but something in his eyes looked older than it had when he left the farm. "I know who I am, Professor. I don't need Dean Halden to confirm it." Celeste swallowed. She wanted to say more. Instead, she nodded and left. That evening, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed. His leather notebook rested on the desk. Moonlight fell across the diagrams. He picked up his phone and called home. Warren answered. "Hey, son, how was it?" Marcus tried to answer. The first words did not come. Then he spoke. "Dad, can you come to the school?" There was silence. Warren heard something in his son's voice that almost no one else would have noticed. A crack beneath the control. "What happened?" Marcus told him everything. The public humiliation, the comments about the farm, the whisper about washing, the laughter, the straw beneath the door, the note. Warren did not interrupt. Marcus could hear his father breathing slowly on the other end. Then Warren spoke. "I'll be there." The call ended. Marcus had no idea that Warren immediately began making calls. One went to his chief of security. Another went to his executive office. Another went to Miranda Sloan, a highly respected civil rights attorney, known for taking difficult cases and refusing to be intimidated by powerful institutions. While Marcus tried to sleep, Dean Halden sat behind a large mahogany desk in the administration building. A desk lamp cast warm light over stacks of paperwork. An unfinished drink rested beside his computer. Portraits of former deans lined the wall. His email notification sounded. Halden opened the message. Professor Celeste Warren had filed a formal ethics complaint. The complaint described discriminatory conduct during freshman orientation and requested immediate review. Halden read it, then read it again. His expression hardened. He called Celeste. "My office." When she arrived, the door closed behind her. The blinds were drawn. Halden did not offer her a seat. She sat anyway. "Celeste," he said her first name slowly. "Do you understand what you've done? I filed a complaint based on what I witnessed." "What you witnessed?" Halden leaned back. "You witnessed a dean addressing his students. Nothing more. I witnessed a dean publicly humiliating a teenager because of his race and his family's occupation." Halden's eyes changed. The warmth disappeared completely. "Let me make something clear. Your tenure review comes through this office. I write the evaluation. I chair the committee. My recommendation matters." He paused. "Do you really want to become the professor who made an enemy of the person holding that much influence over your career?" Celeste's fingers trembled in her lap. She pressed them against her legs. "Are you threatening me? I'm advising you. Withdraw the complaint. Let it go. Everyone will be happier. Especially you." Celeste stood. Her legs felt unsteady. She kept her shoulders straight. She walked to the door, then turned. "The complaint stays." She left. Halden watched the door close. Then he opened Marcus Reed's student file. If Celeste would not withdraw the complaint, Halden decided he would change the story. He began creating a paper trail against Marcus. Failure to integrate, attitude concerns, questions about cultural fit, concerns about academic adaptability. None of it came from actual evidence. None of it came from Marcus's grades. None of it came from faculty reports. It was bureaucratic language, designed to make prejudice sound professional. Halden prepared a recommendation asking the scholarship committee to reconsider Marcus's chancellor's scholarship. Then he saved the document. Marcus's problems continued before his father arrived. I was in the basement laundry room of his residence hall, folding clothes from a dryer. Fluorescent lights buzzed above him. The room smelled like detergent and damp concrete. The door opened hard. Blake Harrington walked in. Two friends followed. Marcus kept folding. Blake crossed his arms. "Farm boy does his own laundry. That's cute." Marcus did not look up. Blake moved closer. "I'm talking to you." Marcus folded another shirt. Blake slapped the laundry basket from the table. Clothes scattered across the damp floor. Marcus's flannel shirt landed in dirty water near the drain. It was the shirt Warren had given him before he left home. Marcus looked at it. Then he looked at Blake. "Pick that up. Quiet. Level. No shouting." Blake laughed. "Or what? You going to call your father? What's he going to do? Drive a tractor up here and rescue you?" His friends laughed. Then Blake grabbed Marcus by the collar and shoved him backward into the concrete wall. Marcus's head struck the wall. Pain flashed behind his eyes. Blake leaned in. Halden doesn't want you here. Nobody wants you here. You're a charity case. Go back to your barn. Marcus did not swing at him. He did not shove back. He looked directly into Blake's eyes. Let go of me, and remember this moment carefully. Blake shoved him once more, then released him. The three students walked out laughing. They believed no one had seen. They were wrong. A freshman named Caleb Porter had been sitting behind the last row of washing machines. He had earbuds in and had been on a video call when Blake entered. His phone was propped against his backpack. The camera captured the encounter. So did the residence hall security camera above the doorway. Every shove, every word, every movement. Marcus stood alone after they left. He picked his clothing from the floor one piece at a time. He lifted the soaked flannel shirt. He wrung out the water carefully, folded it, placed it back in the basket. Then he returned to his room, changed clothes, and went to class. A campus security officer later arrived at the lecture hall and handed Marcus a message. Dean Halden wanted him in the administration building. Marcus entered Halden's office. Halden sat behind the desk with a manila folder open. He pointed toward a chair. Sit. Marcus sat. I'll be direct, Mr. Reed. I've received concerns regarding your ability to adapt to the Hargrove community. Your attitude has been described as uncooperative. There are concerns about your social integration. Marcus looked at him. What exactly have I done wrong, sir? Halden ignored the question. I have initiated a review of your chancellor's scholarship. Given these concerns, it may be appropriate to reconsider whether the award was placed correctly. Marcus felt the words hit. His face did not change. You're reviewing my scholarship because my father is a farmer. I'm protecting the integrity of this institution. Halden leaned forward. Sometimes a place simply isn't the right fit. That is no one's fault. A community college closer to home may be more appropriate for someone with your background. Less pressure, a more familiar environment. People more like you. Marcus stared at him. Then he stood. My father is coming. Halden laughed softly. Good. I'll be happy to explain it to him. Farmer to farmer. Man to man. I'll tell him his son gave Hargrove an honest try, but this university simply isn't where he belongs. I'm sure a man who works with his hands understands plain talk. Marcus walked to the door. I did not slam it. He closed it gently. Outside, students crossed the quad. Professors carried coffee toward lecture halls. Groundskeepers worked beside the stone paths. Then someone near the main gate stopped. A black Cadillac Escalade turned through the entrance. Then another. Then another. The vehicles kept coming until 10 black sport utility vehicles moved slowly along Hargrove's tree-lined drive. Students stopped walking. A professor lowered his briefcase. Reception staff inside the administration building stood and watched through the glass. The convoy stopped in front of the building. Doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out first. Security personnel. Earpieces. Measured movements. Eyes scanning the area. Then the rear door of the lead vehicle opened. Warren Reed stepped onto the pavement. The muddy boots were gone. So was the faded army cap. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, polished black shoes, an understated watch. He carried a leather briefcase. His expression was controlled. Beside him walked Miranda Sloan, navy suit, calm face, a civil rights attorney, known throughout the region. They entered the administration building together. The receptionist stood quickly. "Can I help you?" "Dean Halden's office," Warren said. It was not phrased like a request. When Warren reached the office, Halden looked up. I saw a black man in an expensive suit. Then he smiled. "You must be Marcus's father." Halden stood and extended his hand. "The farmer. Please sit. I was just explaining to your son that a different environment may be more suitable." Warren did not shake his hand. He walked past the open palm. He sat down. Then he placed the briefcase on Halden's desk. Miranda entered behind him and placed a business card in front of the dean. Halden looked at the name. His smile weakened. I knew it. People in legal circles knew Miranda Sloan. Warren opened the briefcase. "My name is Warren Reed." His voice was measured. "I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Canopy Global Industries. Our annual revenue is approximately $4.2 billion. I am also a farmer, and I am Marcus's father. The color began leaving Halden's face. Warren continued. I am also the largest anonymous donor in Hargrove University's history. Your Sustainable Agriculture Research Center. The building pictured in your brochures and fundraising materials was built with an $85 million gift from my foundation. Halden opened his mouth. No words came. Warren leaned slightly forward. But none of that is the reason I'm here. My son's entrance examination score was 1,580. He won a national gold medal in agricultural science. I earned the Chancellor's scholarship on merit. Our family could have paid his tuition many times over. Marcus chose not to arrive under my name. I wanted to earn his place without asking anyone to treat him differently because of me. Warren paused, and you looked at him and saw only a farmer's son, with mud on his boots. Halden gripped the arm of his chair. Miranda opened a tablet. She turned it toward him. The first video came from Renee Palmer's phone. Halden watched himself in the great hall. What is that smell? The fanning gesture. The jokes about cattle. The word scarecrow. The insult about washing. Every expression. Every pause. Every laugh from the audience. The next recording came from the residence hall. Blake grabbing Marcus by the collar. Marcus being shoved against the wall. The security camera captured the scene clearly. Halden had already received notice that an incident occurred. I had taken no meaningful action before calling Marcus into his office to question the scholarship. Then Miranda opened another recording. Celeste had preserved the conversation from Halden's office. The dean heard his own voice. Your tenure review comes through me. Do you really want to make an enemy of the person with that kind of influence over your career? Halden shifted in his chair. Mr. Reed, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Warren interrupted. There is no misunderstanding. Only consequences. Halden raised his hands. Let's slow down. I'll admit the language at orientation was poorly chosen. It was a joke that landed badly. I have tremendous respect for agricultural families. My grandfather even kept a vegetable garden. Warren looked at him. Don't. One word. Halden stopped. You did not make one bad joke. You told my son he smelled like cattle. You called him a scarecrow. You suggested his father had not taught him basic cleanliness. Then a student targeted him outside the hall. Another note appeared under his door. I was later shoved against a wall in his residence building. You did not protect him. Professor Warren filed a complaint. You threatened her career. Then you created a false record to challenge Marcus's scholarship. Warren placed both hands flat on the desk. That is not one joke. That is a pattern. Halden tried another approach. Mr. Reed, a man of your stature understands that language can be taken out of context. We can resolve this quietly, privately, between people who understand how institutions work. Warren stared at him. My son could have arrived in a limousine. I could have used my name at the front gate. He could have walked into this office and told you exactly who his father was. He chose not to. I took a bus. He carried his own bags. I wanted to earn his place the same way I built mine, from the dirt up. Warren's voice softened, and you made him feel like the dirt was all he was. He paused. So no, we will not handle this by hiding it. The office door opened. Chancellor Marjorie Hale entered. Miranda had already contacted her. The words, "Federal Civil Rights Complaint and Documented Retaliation," had been enough to bring the Chancellor directly into the matter. Behind closed doors, Miranda presented the full case. The orientation video. The residence hall footage. The recording of Halden threatening Celeste. The scholarship memorandum. Then she opened disciplinary data from Halden's department. The numbers showed that Black and Latino students had been placed on academic probation at 3.5 times the rate of white students. Multiple complaints from students of color had also been buried or dismissed during Halden's tenure. Marjorie looked at the screen. Her face changed. Miranda spoke calmly. This is not an isolated incident. It is documented. The Chancellor turned toward Halden. He started to speak. She raised a hand. Don't. Effective immediately. You are placed on administrative suspension while a full investigation is conducted. Your campus access will be revoked. You will leave the building today. Halden stood. His legs looked unsteady. Marjorie, you can't do this. I've given this university 18 years. Marjorie looked toward the disciplinary data. And in those 18 years, this is what we failed to confront. Gather your things. Halden left the administration building carrying a cardboard box. Campus security walked beside him. Students watched from the quad. From windows. From benches. No one cheered. No one laughed. They simply watched. Blake Harrington stood near the fountain. The smirk was gone. His father's money and the family name on a university building no longer looked like protection. Professor Celeste Warren watched from an upper floor. Her eyes were wet. Her shoulders remained straight. She had filed the complaint, knowing the decision could threaten her career. She had no idea what the outcome would be. She only knew silence had become harder to live with than the risk of speaking. Meanwhile, Renee Palmer posted the orientation recording. Her caption was simple. She explained that this was what happened to her daughter's classmate during freshman orientation. The video spread rapidly. People saw Halden wrinkle his nose. They heard him mock the farm. They heard the slow clap. They saw Marcus standing in the front row while hundreds of people watched. They heard the final insult. Then they saw the young man sit down in silence. News organizations picked up the story. At first, headlines focused on the obvious surprise. University dean humiliates Black scholarship student. Then discovers student's father is billionaire donor. But the public conversation began changing as journalists examined Marcus's own record. The entrance examination score, the National Science Medal, the admissions essay, the scholarship. People realized something important. Marcus did not belong at Hargrove because Warren Reed was wealthy. Marcus belonged because Marcus had earned the seat. The money did not create his merit. The family connection did not explain his scholarship. The billionaire reveal did not make the humiliation wrong. It had been wrong before anyone knew who his father was. That became the deeper story. The student treated as though he did not belong was one of the most qualified students in the room. An investigative journalist named Dana Whitaker began looking further into Halden's record. She contacted former students, former faculty, people who had transferred, people whose complaints disappeared. The deeper she looked, the clearer the pattern became. A Black student with a strong grade point average had been placed on academic probation for vague attitude concerns. A Latina freshman had been told she should be grateful for admission instead of being ambitious. A Black professor named Dr. Rochelle Price had been denied tenure after publicly questioning disciplinary disparities affecting students of color. Halden had written her evaluation. Her academic career never fully recovered. Former students described being told they were too aggressive, too sensitive, not a cultural fit, not ready, not grateful enough. Different words, same message. You do not belong here as naturally as someone else. Dana's reporting included the data. Under Halden's leadership, Black and Latino students in the Department of Science and Engineering had been placed on academic probation at 3.5 times the rate of white students. Formal complaints from students of color had repeatedly been dismissed without serious disciplinary action against faculty. The numbers made the pattern difficult to explain away. So did the stories. Miranda Sloan filed a civil rights complaint with the United States Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. She also requested a broader state review of Halden's record and the university's handling of complaints. Blake Harrington faced a separate student conduct process because of the residence hall recording. The video showed him grabbing Marcus and shoving him into a wall. It also recorded the intimidation. His father's donations could not erase what the camera had captured. Halden hired an experienced attorney. The attorney reviewed the videos, the data, the recordings, and the complaint history. The advice was simple. Cooperate. Settle where possible. Do not pretend the evidence does not exist. Halden resisted. He still believed years of status and institutional relationships would protect him. They did not. Hargrove University's Board of Trustees eventually held a public hearing. The room filled beyond capacity. Local media gathered near the back. Community members waited in the hallway. One person after another spoke. Renee Palmer, described sitting beside her daughter during orientation. My daughter looked at me and asked whether what she was seeing was allowed. Renee paused. I didn't know what to tell her. What kind of university lets a student be humiliated like that in a room full of adults? Dr. Rochelle Price traveled to testify. Her hands trembled as she approached the microphone. She described questioning why black students were disciplined more often. She described being called confrontational. She described losing her position. Then she said something the room did not forget. I lost years of research. I lost a job I loved. But the hardest thing I lost was my belief that the institution would be fair if I simply followed every rule. Several trustees looked down. A former Hargrove student who had become an attorney described being told during college that she had taken a seat from someone more deserving. She later transferred. I believed him for years, she said. I spent years wondering whether I had ever deserved to be there. One person's words can stay inside you long after the person who said them has forgotten. The trustees deliberated. When they returned, the vote was unanimous. Victor Halden was terminated. His record was forwarded for further state and federal review. His professional standing and teaching credentials were subject to action by the appropriate authorities. Halden sat quietly in the gallery. I did not speak. He stared ahead, while the institution he once controlled moved forward without him. The consequences did not stop with Halden. Warren Reed announced a new scholarship program through the Reed Foundation. $15 million would support students from farming and working-class families who earned admission to leading universities. The first 5 recipients came from rural communities and families where higher education had often felt financially impossible. Hargrove University required bias training for faculty and administrators. Its disciplinary process was redesigned. An independent oversight committee, including students, faculty members, and community representatives, was created to review future complaints. Professor Celeste Warren, who had filed the complaint despite the risk to her career, was appointed Associate Dean of the Department of Science and Engineering. She became the first black woman to hold the role at Hargrove. Blake Harrington was suspended for a full semester. His father quietly removed the family name from the athletic wing he had funded. No ceremony, no public speech. Maintenance workers simply took the plaque down. Marcus eventually walked through Hargrove's iron gates again. The campus looked familiar. Stone buildings, tree-lined paths, students crossing the quad with books and coffee. But the way people treated him had changed. A student Marcus barely knew waved. "Hey, Marcus." Marcus blinked. "Hey." A group of freshmen near the fountain called to him. "Reed, you sitting with us at lunch?" Marcus smiled. A real smile. The first one that had felt effortless since leaving the farm. "Yeah, save me a seat." I entered the science building. A new nameplate had been placed beside a corner office. Dr. Celeste Warren, Associate Dean, Department of Science and Engineering. Celeste was inside arranging books. She saw Marcus in the doorway. Her expression softened. She reached over and straightened his collar with the familiarity of an aunt. "You ready for this semester, Mr. Reed?" "Yes, ma'am. More than ready." "Good." She smiled. "Because I expect excellence. Not because of your father. Because of you." Marcus grinned. Then he walked down the hall to the laboratory. He sat at a workbench, opened the old leather notebook. The pages were filled with diagrams. Solar-powered irrigation. Automated moisture control. A design, meant for small farms that could not afford expensive infrastructure. Marcus picked up a pencil. He began refining the system. The farmer's son was not simply attending Hargrove. I was already working on something that might one day help farmers who looked a lot like his father. Far away from campus, Warren returned to the farm. Work clothes, muddy boots, faded army cap, mist moving over the pasture, roosters calling, coffee cooling nearby. His phone buzzed. A news alert showed the first 5 students selected for the Reed Foundation Scholarship Program. The photograph showed 5 teenagers standing together on a college campus. Students from farms, small towns, working families, young people who looked very much like Marcus had when he left home, carrying an old backpack and a dream. Warren studied the photograph. A quiet smile crossed his face. Then he put the phone away. picked up the feed bucket, and went back to work. Marcus sat alone in his dorm room later. The leather notebook lay open. The photograph of the farm still hung on the wall. Campus lights glowed outside the window. Marcus picked up his phone and recorded a voice memo. It was something he had been thinking about since watching Halden leave the university, carrying a cardboard box. My dad could live almost anywhere. He could wear the most expensive clothes. He could make sure everyone knows his name before he walks into a room. But he still chooses dirt under his fingernails and mornings on the farm. I think he understands something people forget. Your worth isn't whatever another person sees during the first few seconds. It's what you build when nobody is watching. Marcus saved the recording. Then he closed the notebook. What happened to him at Hargrove was painful. But the deepest lesson was never that Dean Halden should have been kinder, because Marcus happened to have a wealthy father. If that were the lesson, then the story would miss the point. Marcus deserved respect before anyone knew about Canopy Global Industries. He deserved it when he stepped off the public bus. He deserved it when his roommate saw the muddy boots. He deserved it while sitting alone in the front row. He deserved it, even if his father had truly been an unknown farmer, earning barely enough to keep the lights on. He deserved it because dignity is not something people earn through money, family names, clothing, or influence. Dignity comes first. That may be the most important thing viewers can carry from this story. Never confuse appearance with ability. Mud on someone's boots can mean they worked before sunrise. A worn backpack can belong to the strongest student in the class. A quiet person may be thinking more deeply than everyone speaking around them. A farmer may understand technology, finance, leadership, and sacrifice better than people who judge him from a distance. And a young person from a small town may be carrying ideas that could someday improve lives far beyond that town. We rarely know the full story of the person standing in front of us. That is exactly why respect should not wait for the full story. There is also a lesson in Marcus's composure. He did not stay calm because the insults did not hurt. They did. He remembered every word. He felt the laughter. He noticed every adult who looked away. He kept the note pushed beneath his door. He felt the impact when Blake shoved him into the wall. His calm was not proof that the experience was harmless. It was the way Marcus protected his ability to choose what happened next. He documented. He remembered. He called someone he trusted. He let evidence speak where anger alone might have been dismissed. That kind of self-control can be powerful. But it is also important not to turn Marcus's response into a rule for everyone who is mistreated. People respond to humiliation differently. Some cry, some shake, some become angry, some freeze, some need time before they can speak. Their dignity does not depend on performing perfect calm. The useful lesson is simpler. When possible, create enough space to choose your next move rather than letting someone else choose it for you. A breath can create that space. A note can create it. Saving a message can create it. Calling a parent, professor, friend, counselor, or trusted authority can create it. Asking someone to witness what happened can create it. Marcus used the tools he had. Other people may use different tools. The important thing is not to mistake silence for surrender. Marcus also knew something about evidence that many people only learn after a painful experience. He kept the note from under his door. I did not throw it away. Celeste documented her complaint. Renee recorded the orientation. The residence hall camera captured Blake's actions. Caleb's phone captured another angle. Miranda used data instead of relying only on outrage. Those details mattered because institutions can argue about feelings. They can argue about intentions. They can say someone misunderstood. Documentation makes that harder. It does not guarantee fairness, but it gives truth something solid to stand on. Another lesson belongs to the people who watched. At orientation, many adults knew Halden had crossed a line. A parent shook her head. A professor stared at the floor. Faculty members stayed against the walls. Some students stopped laughing, yet almost everyone remained quiet. That silence did not make them equal to Halden, but it did make the room easier for him to control. Celeste understood that afterward. Her apology to Marcus mattered because she did not excuse herself. She did not say there was nothing she could have done. She said the simpler and harder thing. I should have spoken. I didn't. I'm sorry. Then she changed what she did next. She filed the complaint. Even after Halden threatened her career, she kept it in place. That is an important kind of courage. Courage is not always being fearless in the first moment. Sometimes courage arrives after regret. Sometimes we look back and realize we stayed silent when we wanted to speak. We cannot reopen the exact moment, but we can decide what we do with the next one. Celeste did. Caleb did by preserving the recording. Renee did by making the video available. Former students did by returning to tell stories they had carried quietly for years. Dr. Price did by standing at a microphone and describing what the institution had cost her. Late truth is still truth. Late courage can still protect someone. The story also has something important to say about people like Blake. Privilege does not automatically make someone cruel. Money does not automatically destroy character. But privilege can become dangerous when a person starts believing consequences belong only to other people. Blake treated Marcus as though his father's donations made him untouchable. He used status as permission. Marcus's father used status differently. Warren had enormous power. He could have placed his name on buildings. He could have demanded special treatment for Marcus before the first day of class. He could have told the university exactly who his son was and expected doors to open. Instead, he allowed Marcus to enter as himself. When Warren finally used his influence, he did not use it to buy Marcus a scholarship or change a grade. He used it to demand that evidence be examined. That is a meaningful distinction. Power is not automatically good or bad. What matters is what a person does with it. One person used social status to humiliate. Another used influence to insist on accountability. That is why leadership must be tied to responsibility. Warren also did something many leaders struggle to do. He refused to make the story entirely about his own family. Once the larger pattern became visible, he supported reforms for students he had never met. The scholarship program did not benefit Marcus. Marcus already had his scholarship. The new program helped other students from farming and working-class families. That is how pain can become something larger than revenge. A person can ask, how do I make sure what happened to me, or someone I love, becomes less likely for the next person? That question moves us from punishment toward repair. Consequences were still necessary. Halden had used his position to humiliate a student, threaten a professor, create false concerns, and participate in a system with serious disparities. Blake had physically intimidated Marcus. Those actions required accountability, but accountability was not the final destination. The university also changed how complaints were reviewed. It changed training. It created outside oversight. It elevated a professor who had shown integrity under pressure. Warren created new opportunities for students from backgrounds that elite institutions sometimes overlook. Those changes matter, because removing one harmful person does not automatically repair a system. A new person can eventually repeat the same pattern if the structure still rewards silence. Real reform asks harder questions. Who receives complaints? Who reviews them? Who is protected? Whose voice is trusted? What happens when a manager threatens someone who reports wrongdoing? What data are leaders actually studying? Which students leave quietly before anyone asks why? That last question matters. Before Marcus, there were other students. Some transferred. Some stayed and doubted themselves. Some reported what happened and watched the complaint disappear. Some faculty members questioned the pattern and paid a professional price. By the time Marcus arrived, the warning signs already existed. The crisis did not begin in the Great Hall. The Great Hall simply made it visible. That is a lesson for schools, businesses, families, teams, and communities. Serious failures are often preceded by smaller signals. A joke everyone knows is cruel. A complaint no one wants to handle. A student repeatedly described as difficult. A co-worker consistently treated as less capable. Rule applied differently, depending on who is involved. A leader whose bad behavior is excused because they have been around for years. When small warnings are ignored, they do not disappear. They accumulate. Eventually, one incident becomes impossible to hide. It is better to listen earlier. There is also something powerful in Warren remaining a farmer. After all the vehicles, lawyers, corporate numbers, and attention, he returned to the chicken coop. He still wore muddy boots. He still carried feed. He still let coffee go cold while finishing chores. That image reminds us that success does not require rejecting the place we came from. Sometimes the world tells people that growth means becoming unrecognizable to their own roots. Warren believed something different. He built a global company without treating the farm as something embarrassing. Marcus followed the same path. His engineering project was not an attempt to escape farming. It came from understanding farming deeply enough to improve it. I took what others mocked and turned it into knowledge. That is worth remembering. The parts of our background someone else dismisses may become the very things that make our work distinctive. A child raised around fields may understand water differently. Someone raised in a family business may understand customers differently. A person who grew up translating for parents may become an unusually thoughtful communicator. Someone who grew up fixing old equipment may become an engineer. Hardship is not automatically a gift. Nobody needs humiliation in order to become strong. But people often develop insight from the places they have had to pay close attention. Marcus's boots were not proof that he did not belong in a science program. They were evidence of the world his science was trying to serve. Professor Celeste understood that when she told him she expected excellence because of who he was, not because of his father. That sentence corrected something the university had gotten wrong from the beginning. Respect should not move from contempt to admiration only after wealth is revealed. Marcus did not need to become Warren Reed's son in the eyes of the campus. I needed to be seen as Marcus Reed, a student, a scientist in training, a young man with discipline, a person with a right to learn without being humiliated. That is the deeper form of belonging. Belonging is not receiving special treatment. It is not everyone praising you. It is being allowed to enter a room without having to prove your humanity before you can prove your ability. There is also a lesson for parents. Warren could not protect Marcus from every cruel comment. No parent can. I could give him cars, money, security, connections. But he chose to give Marcus something else first. Work, confidence, skills, a sense of identity that did not depend on applause. That foundation mattered when Marcus stood in the great hall alone. His father's influence eventually arrived, but Marcus's character was already there. Parents and mentors cannot follow young people into every classroom, workplace, interview, airport, or difficult conversation. What they can do is help them build an inner foundation. Know what you value. Know what you have earned. Know when to ask for help. Know that someone else's disrespect does not become truth simply because they speak from a podium. And know that asking for support is not the same as being weak. Marcus tried to handle the first insults quietly. When the situation grew more serious, he called his father. That was not failure. That was judgment. Strong people still need other people. The story also leaves room for forgiveness, though not the kind that erases consequences. Marcus did not have to pretend Halden's behavior was acceptable. Celeste did not have to withdraw her complaint. The former students did not have to forget what happened. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would be personal. Accountability belonged to the institution. Those two things are different. A person can choose not to live in hatred while still believing a harmful leader should lose authority. A person can move forward while still telling the truth. A community can hope someone learns from consequences without pretending those consequences were unnecessary. There is humanity in holding both ideas at once. People should be responsible for what they do. And people are more than the worst decision they ever made, if they are willing to face it honestly and change. The story does not tell us whether Halden eventually understood that. It does not need to. The larger responsibility was to protect students. The same is true for Blake. His suspension was not about humiliation. It was a boundary. You cannot use intimidation and expect your family name to erase it. Boundaries teach communities what behavior they are willing to accept. The most hopeful part of the story may not be Halden leaving. It may be Marcus returning. I walked through the same gates. The buildings had not moved. The portraits were still on the walls. The university had not become perfect overnight. But Marcus opened his notebook and went back to work. That matters. Sometimes the most powerful response to being told you do not belong is not to spend the rest of your life arguing with the person who said it. It is to continue building. Marcus kept studying. I kept designing. I kept showing up. And he made friends. He accepted a seat at lunch. He allowed himself to smile again. Moving forward did not erase what happened. It prevented what happened from becoming the only thing that defined him. That is an important distinction. A painful experience can become part of your story without becoming your entire identity. You can remember it, learn from it, use it, then keep building something larger. Marcus's voice memo captured that beautifully. Your worth is not what people see. It is what you build when nobody is watching. That does not mean achievement is the price of dignity. Marcus would still deserve respect if he had never won a medal. The sentence means something more personal. Our deepest sense of self cannot safely depend on every stranger seeing us accurately. Some people will misunderstand. Some will judge too quickly. Some will see clothes, accent, neighborhood, job, race, family background, or education and decide they know the whole person. We cannot control every conclusion. We can keep building character that does not depend on those conclusions. Integrity when nobody is watching. Skill developed quietly. Kindness that brings no reward. Work completed without applause. Courage to speak when silence is easier. Humility to admit when we failed to speak. Responsibility when our choices hurt someone. Those are the things that survive other people's assumptions. And there is one more lesson that deserves to be said clearly. Never treat people well because you are afraid they might secretly be powerful. That is not respect. That is self-protection. Dean Halden's mistake was not that he failed to recognize the son of a billionaire. His mistake was believing a farmer's son deserved less dignity in the first place. If Warren had owned only the farm and nothing else, Halden's behavior would still have been wrong. If Marcus had arrived with average grades instead of exceptional ones, the public humiliation would still have been wrong. If no one had recorded the ceremony, it would still have been wrong. If no convoy had ever entered the gate, it would still have been wrong. That is the standard worth carrying into everyday life. Treat the unknown person well. Treat the worker with muddy boots well. Treat the student who arrived by bus well. Treat the person whose family cannot donate a building well. Treat the person who cannot help your career well. Treat people with dignity before you know whether doing so benefits you. That is where character becomes visible. And if you are in a position of authority, remember that your words carry more weight than you may realize. A sentence can follow a student for years. A teacher's encouragement can do the same in a better direction. A manager's shrug can silence a complaint. A leader's willingness to listen can protect someone. Power magnifies ordinary choices. That is why responsibility must grow with authority. Halden used a microphone to make a young man smaller. Celeste eventually used her position to help make the institution better. Warren used wealth to expand opportunity. Marcus used his education to design something for small farms. Different forms of power, different choices, different consequences. That may be the simplest way to understand the whole story. We do not always choose the power we receive. We choose what we do with it. We do not choose every judgment made about us. We choose whether we allow it to become our identity. We cannot repair every institution alone. We can decide whether our own silence helps a harmful pattern continue. And we cannot promise that kindness will always be rewarded. We can still decide that kindness is the kind of life we want to build. So when you see someone with dirt on their boots, do not assume you know where they are going. When you meet someone from a small town, do not mistake simplicity for lack of ambition. When someone speaks quietly, do not confuse calm with weakness. When a student arrives without a famous name, do not assume they were given the seat. And when you realize you failed to speak in a difficult moment, do not spend the rest of your life hiding from the regret. Make the next choice better. Apologize when you should. Document what matters. Support the person standing alone. Use influence responsibly. Accept consequences. Repair what can be repaired. Then keep moving. Warren went back to the farm. Marcus went back to the laboratory. Celeste went back to the university with more responsibility than before. The scholarship recipients walked onto campuses carrying their own stories. Life continued. That is how meaningful change often looks. Not one dramatic victory frozen forever. A series of better choices made afterward. A complaint finally taken seriously. A policy rewritten. A scholarship offered. A door held open. A professor who speaks. A student who stays. A father who listens. A young man who opens his notebook and keeps building. Never judge someone's harvest by the dirt on their boots. But even that lesson can go one step deeper. You do not need to know what harvest is coming. You do not need to know whether the person will become wealthy, famous, powerful, or successful. Their future achievement is not what makes them worthy today. Respect them now. Listen now. Be fair now. Because dignity should never have to wait for the reveal.